Hey everybody, Danielle Hargenrader here. Welcome to another episode of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. Today I'm really excited to bring you Kerri Sparling. And if you don't know Kerri, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in September of 1986. I was September too, but 1991. For much of her life, she was the only diabetic she knew, and thankfully that is not the case anymore. She started 6 Until Me in May of 2005 because she was tired of Googling diabetes and coming up with little more than just a list of complications and frightening stories, aren't we all? Where were all the people who were living with disease like she had been since she was a little girl? Was she the only diabetic out there who felt alone, she wondered? So Kerri learned about blogs and the power of sharing our stories online. And back when she first started blogging, she was one of 4 or 5 diabetes bloggers. Now, Kerri is a proud member of a vast diabetes community who prove every day that we are not alone with this disease. Kerri is a writer, a speaker, and a diabetes advocate, and truly loves what she does for work. She lives in Rhode Island with her husband, Chris, and their daughter, Birdie. They have 2 cats, and so do I, named Sia. Is it Sia? Saya?
It's Saya, yeah.
Saya and Loopy, both of whom appreciate an aggressive snuggle. I love that. Kerri likes to go to the beach with her daughter. She likes to go running. And she loves new music, so she wants to hear your playlist. And Kerri's first book, Balancing Diabetes, was released by Spry Publishing in March of 2014. So Kerri, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
Good, thank you. It's so weird to have a third-person bio read while I'm listening. That always freaks me out just a tiny bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're pretty impressive, so we kind of have to get all that stuff out of the way before we really get down to the good stuff. So if you would be so willing to share with us your story of diagnosis and whatever you'd like to share with us about your kind of path that you were on from then until now.
Sure. So I was diagnosed on September 11th in 1986, and I was 7 years old at the time. So it wasn't, I don't really, like, I think a lot of people remember this big dramatic diagnosis story. I remember squat. Like, I remember being picked up from soccer practice and told that the doctor said there was something weird with my pee. I was 7. I didn't know, I thought pee was funny. So I didn't really think too much about what could be possibly wrong with it other than it's pee, right? And it wasn't until we got to the hospital and they like explained diabetes, and I didn't know what the word meant, but my parents were like upset and crying. So I knew something awesome was not happening. But again, it's hard to conceptualize disease and mortality. You're 7 years old. You're into climbing trees and chasing squirrels, kind of like, I guess, a cat. And so now I've made myself sound like a cat. It's sad times, right? But so I didn't really have a whole lot of context to put diabetes in, except for the fact that I had it and I wasn't dead, so I had to keep going. And then you ask, going from diagnosis to now. Diagnosis to now has been my whole life. Like, I don't have a good memory of before diabetes. Life has always been an after. So I can't think of anything that hasn't been touched by it, except for maybe the first 6 Halloweens of my life. But everything after that has been pretty consistent with its needles and the highs and lows and all that stuff. And I can't say it's been the worst, but I would also say I'm not a big fan of it. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say that is a very fair assessment. I mean, I find that I have had my own, kind of physical and mental transformation with diabetes, as I feel most people do. And I'm kind of a big proponent of, I was 9, so I guess a couple years older, although it's still kind of a pretty young child. But I feel like it's not addressed that like there's kind of this grieving process that needs to happen. And it's like a very like, okay, here's the insulin regimen, and here's this kind of like by the books kind of thing that you have to do. But meanwhile, they're not like, okay, you kind of have to grieve the fact that you're, even if it's only 7, that 7 years that you spent before that person, not that that person's not there, it's totally there, but the lifestyle that that person had become accustomed to is no longer the lifestyle. So I feel like there's definitely that process that has to happen. And, some of us don't really get that information in the beginning. So I guess to get more specific about, your path, I like to ask people, because I feel like it helps us connect like to the humanity of it, is that we obviously all struggle, maybe for me, I had an eating disorder, and maybe nothing is, I interviewed somebody that had a severe fear of needles, and they had to go through therapy to get through that. So was there any like one particular thing that you feel maybe you struggled with more than anything else, and that kind of maybe blogging helped you get through, or figuring out that you weren't alone helped you get through, or something like that?
That was kind of a big thing. Like, you talk about a grieving process and the way that you talked about it for you, it seems like you went through it kind of upon diagnosis. But I think it's fair to also say that people will go through that grieving process whenever, it strikes them. I mean, you can be diagnosed at 7 and grieve properly at the age of 25. It all depends on how this emotionally maps for you. And then you can also grieve more than once. So you can have, there's like degrees of grieving, degrees, I guess you could call them. And like, you can't think that it's going to be the same for everybody, or that everybody's going to be as accepting or as upset. And that's the weirdest thing about diabetes. We all have the same thing not working in truly the exact same way. But the way it manifests in you and the way it manifests in me and the way all these other different people deal with it, it blows my mind how circumstantial and situational it is. It's amazing. You and I could get up and eat the exact same breakfast, have the exact same opening blood sugar, and the whole day could go awesome or straight to hell dependent upon 100,000 different things. And that blows my mind, right?
Yeah.
You can't do the same thing every single day. And if you do, you'll just be frustrated by the fact that you have this fluctuation of results. And that's the thing I think that I struggle the most with diabetes-wise. And that's where you had mentioned blogging and finding out I wasn't alone. I didn't know anybody really growing up with diabetes, especially in the years that it mattered most. And for me was that like 16 to 22 range where I was developing a strong sense of self, but still very isolated when it came to this physical thing that I was dealing with that was also emotional, but nobody talked about that side of it. So I felt isolated and weird about it. And finding my peers and finding my tribe, like that was so huge, because I don't know, those same people going, yeah, I also do the exact same thing every day and have completely maddeningly different results. And knowing other people were doing that made me feel less like a failure and more, I don't know, like there was something I could still aspire towards, and I wasn't the only one struggling in these specific ways. It's just cracking me up to watch a cattail like walk by behind you. I think that's so entertaining.
Oh yeah, so yeah, she does that. That's Frankie. She's a camera hog.
Like a shark fin going by.
She won't bite. But yeah, I think she's going to settle on the chair now. But yeah, she's like my interview cat. But yeah, I totally agree with everything you're saying. And I had the same experience in that, you know, and I think we had the same kind of time frame in that there were no computers. There was no internet when we were diagnosed, at least not for me. I didn't have a computer until I was like 16 or 17. And back then it was like AOL dial-up hell. Like, I mean, you could get online. That was awesome. Like you were lucky if it connected in like 25 minutes. And like, and even back then, it wasn't like there was this thriving diabetes online community.
No way.
Where people were just like being, you know, you could go to 2 Diabetes now and just chat with people anytime. And back then that wasn't a thing. And I think I remember meeting the first person that I ever knew who had diabetes, because I started waiting tables when I was 18. And I think it was like 24 by the time I was still, you know, I was a bartender at this time. And like some other person that I worked with, I just haphazardly found out she had diabetes. And it wasn't even like we like connected. She was just like, whatever. And I was like, and I was like super excited. I was like, oh my God, you have diabetes.
My friend.
And she's like, whatever. Yeah. And I'm like, oh God, she doesn't even want to talk about it. Now I'm an even bigger loser. Cool. Like, so it was like,
you're like, I don't want to be friends with you anyway. It's cool. Forget it.
I was like, oh, okay, cool. But like that for me too, like I've only been involved heavily in the diabetes online community for like 2 or 3 years at this point, which is like, you know, infancy compared to how long you've been kind of here. But that was big. I mean, was a big for me, like when I started seeing other people's posts about, oh, my blood sugar's high, oh, my pump site came out. Like I was just, it's something like overwhelmingly comforting about it. Like it just, now I'm at conferences, and that's what I tell people. And I had the opportunity to volunteer at a diabetes camp to teach about nutrition. And I was just like, do I have to leave?
You didn't go to diabetes camp as a kid?
No, I didn't. And I was very introverted. And that's the thing. So by the time I was 13 years old, I weighed 200 pounds, and I was very introverted and very kind of, and that was, you know, my father had passed away. And then I just kind of felt like this, I felt like my umbilical cord to my mom had grown back.
Colorful and messy sounding description.
Yeah, right. Like I didn't want to be away from her. Like she was my best friend, and she still is. And like, so I felt like if I was away from her, that like everything would fall to crap. And I just like, she did tell me I could go, and she did, you know, offer it to me, but I didn't go. And I kind of regret that now, but hey, we all have, you know, the course that we run. So yeah. Do you happen to remember by any chance what your first blog was about?
I think, oh, it's not kind of gross. I think one of my first blogs was about sex, which makes me feel slightly embarrassed.
Why?
But I didn't know. For some reason, I was daft. I still am sort of daft, but I didn't realize that when I write about this stuff on the internet, it's not just the people that I give the URL to that are finding this content. It's anybody who goes on the internet. I didn't realize what a vast swath of people that was. So that was one of the things I wondered about a lot, which was at the time when I started my blog, I was like 25 or 26. And that was the kind of stuff that I was interested in finding out more about. Like, how do you disclose diabetes to an employer? How do you talk about it on a first or fifth date? And then when you're in this moment of initiating intimacy, how do you talk about it then? And what are the conversations you should have up until those points? Like, I feel like now the stuff that I write about is really rooted in, I don't know, parenting as a person with diabetes and a lot of travel and this and that. But 10 years ago, it was, how do I get laid? How do I get a job? How do I, and I wanted to find that information. So I think that's what I wrote about. And
I do actually know exactly what you're talking about. And of all the interviews that I've done, it's funny that this is the first time it's come up, because I also had, and I have a blog it's called Sex and Diabetes. It's one of my blogs that's
on my nose.
Totally do. And the thing is because I think that you have to address it. That's the one part. But the second part for me was that I always found myself going low during the act of sex.
Yeah, so kind of ruins it.
How do you say, even if it's with your significant other, it's like, stop, I need to drink juice. Like, it's a very kind of like awkward thing, but it's something that you have to deal with, or else, it's not like you want to like slip into a coma. Like, that would be even
That's the worst way to end that experience, I think.
Talk about awkward ways of ending the whole sexual experience.
Like, for you, it's like me when no, that wasn't good.
So yeah, and I thinking about it now that I've been married for 8 years, I can't, I have clients that, I have a 21-year-old client who's just probably, in that realm of like dating, and like she has a pump and she's like, I don't want to wear Dexcom. She's like, it's already weird enough that I have to talk about what this thing is on my skin. And I feel like that's it's an interesting kind of situation to be in when you're just, I wonder if there is like a real, what's the real formula for that? It's like, hey,
I don't know.
This is what it is. And if you have a problem with it, you're probably not the person I should be having sex with.
See, that's, I like that, because I always viewed, we were both diagnosed around the same time, and I always viewed diabetes as a barometer for jerks. So if I said that I had diabetes to a friend when I was 10 years old, or to a potential partner when I was in my 20s, and they kind of, you can read somebody's body language. So when they sort of, sit back or recoil, you can tell if someone's doing it because they need space to gain acceptance, and when they are actually trying to back away from you. You just sense that difference, right? So it became this litmus test for people I didn't want to be involved with, either as a friend or a romantic partner, which I kind of appreciated it for just a little tiny bit.
No, I think that's a really astute observation, and it makes me think, and I tell my husband this story, and one time I had a date, and I told him that I had diabetes, I think like via text, it was like when we still had like a Nokia, like whatever. And like, I'm like texting like 3 times just to get to like the D. And like, and we're talking about insulin, and I'm like, I am going to have needles, because I just got on a pump 2 years ago, and I'm 24 years in. So I was on manual daily injections, and I was like, I am going to have needles, and I will have to inject insulin. And I just want to let you know, because I don't like to just spring that out on people. So he actually texted back and said, well, could you go to the bathroom and do that? And I was like, no, I can't. And then I never went out on a date with him, because I was just like, ew, no, I'm not going to the bathroom to do it.
Exactly.
If you have a problem with it, then we're not meant to go on a date together. And that's pretty much the end of that. So yeah, I think that's a good out there for people who are thinking about that. If people have a problem with you having diabetes, no matter how hot or good looking they are, it's probably just to drop them at that moment.
But at the same time, so it serves as that litmus test sometimes, but then also, don't you feel like it kind of, I don't know, I always felt like it contributed to my level of acceptance, because I had to lead with that acceptance foot, so to speak. So I had to sit down to a new friendship or a new relationship and be like, listen, I have this and I am cool with it. You should also be cool with it. Like, to set the precedent that this is not something we have a problem with. And I feel like that worked, pretty well. Of course, there were a couple times where people were like, oh, I don't know if I'm into that. I'm like, cool, great. Now I know I'm not into you. That works out perfectly. Thank you for getting this only past coffee,
Yeah, thanks
before you get to anything weird.
A lot more time and money on this whole situation. But yeah,
exactly.
I'm really glad that I had no idea that this was going to go here, but the thing is that this needs to be talked about, because I think we're probably very similar in age. It's like, probably who's out there really talking about this openly? Probably not that many people, you know, it's not like it's like being discussed all the time.
No,
and I feel like
it's intimate and potentially embarrassing. And it's hard for people to put that sort of stuff out there.
And I also feel like, especially younger girls or even guys, they're probably not going to want to talk to their endos about this, and they're probably not going to want to talk to their parents about it either.
Because what are you supposed to say to like your parents and say, will someone love me even if I have diabetes? What parent's going to look at them and go, I don't know, probably not. No, of course not. They're going to say, everyone loves you. You're the most beautiful girl in the world. You're my princess. You're my this. Your parents aren't going to give you the real slice of life. You need to sort of get that from life.
Yeah, exactly. That's really funny and interesting.
Yeah. One of the a post that I wrote, I've written versions of it over the years, but about having, this feels weird because my kid and my husband are right out there, so I feel kind of strange having this conversation. I don't know how much of it they can hear, but about actually having sex with an insulin pump attached, and how that was something I was so curious about, because like you, I did injections for a really long time before I took the leap to pumping. I was 24 when I went on a pump, so I was, you know, established and had relationships before, so it was a new physical symptom of diabetes. And so the idea of having robot parts during the getting to know you phase, or even the once I already know you phase sort of thing, I was completely daunted by. So I've written about it a couple of times because I know I'm not the only one who wondered, when do you disconnect? Are you supposed to tell somebody where you're connected? Like in our house, it becomes, if you hear the pump hit the bedside table, oh, it's on because you've already disconnected. Like we're doing this no matter what. You know what I mean? It becomes like a tell, a really good tell, you know? Oh, is that your, oh, you took your pump off? Oh, all right. You know.
Oh yeah, right. It's like the kid being asleep for like a nap. It's like,
exactly.
Hurry up.
Exactly. Put me, throw the pump, whatever, just come on. But that kind of thing, and people don't talk about that because it sounds so weird and giggly and strange, but at the same time, everybody wonders about it either a lot or a little.
And it's reality.
Yeah.
I
mean, people wear pumps, people have sex. How do you do both?
And yeah, for me, I have it opposite. I mean, like, so I have an Omnipod, so I'm always disconnected. But also the thing is that my husband is like a huge sci-fi nerd. He's like he's very much into robotics and science, so he thinks it's hot. He thinks it's attractive. So it's like, but at the same time, I think it's like you might have to find somebody that's a little nerdy and into like a little bit of weird stuff to like find the right person. And there's nothing wrong with that because we're all a little nerdy and weird, I think. I mean, I am.
Even conversely, if you are using a pump and a CGM or injections or whatever you're doing to take the best care of yourself, that is hot. That is the attractive thing. So whatever tools you're using to keep your body as healthy as possible, somebody finds shame in that method, that's, again, their problem, not yours. You need to continue to exist in a positive way. So who cares if it's mostly cyborg? I'm into it.
Yeah, me too. And I think that leads back to like probably my biggest lesson in life, and one that I had to learn to really take care of myself really well is it's kind of like the foundation of it is self-love. It's like I love myself enough to be really proud that I have diabetes and be really proud that I'm super concerned about taking care of it, or some people might call it obsessed, but I call it dedicated. It's like that's really important to me, and that's hot because I want to live and I want to provide.
It's hot. That's like
I want to provide the best version of me to the world so that I can have the best kind of interactions with everybody that I interact with. And I think that whether you have diabetes or not, that's an attractive quality in a human being.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You brought up that thing. I think that's something that people don't often talk enough about, something about self-care and the fact that it's okay for us to take those moments to do what we actually need to do to take good care of ourselves instead of always putting someone else first or always taking care of other people. Like that seems to be this knee-jerk reaction that I always felt as a girl that was built into me. Always take care of your family, always take care of your friends, never put yourself first. And I was like, wait a minute, this is one circumstance where it's not only good for me to put myself first, it's best for everybody, because what good am I to them if I'm a mess? You know, like you said, the best version sort of thing.
Yeah.
And self-care and diabetes is one of the most important things that we can maintain. We need to be encouraged to maintain it.
Definitely. And I think just getting to that level of, first it's like understanding, and then it's accepting, and then it's embracing that is what needs to be done, A, but then B, that you deserve it. Not just you, not just me. Everybody does. You deserve to be at the top of your totem pole, and that's not selfish. It's actually more selfish to put yourself at the bottom and give that kind of crappy version of yourself to everyone that you love, and then they're meanwhile wondering, why is he or she always in a bad mood, or why are they always feeling a little bit like crabby around me? Maybe they don't like me.
Right.
Well, it's probably because you're not feeling that love for yourself and giving yourself that care. I know for me, that's what it was. I was a bitch when I wasn't taking care care of myself. You know why? Because my blood sugar was high all the time. And aren't we all like kind of
I just am one of those sometimes though. Like I'll point the finger at diabetes and go, oh, it's definitely because of that. But it's probably just because I was being like, ouch.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too, is that like my husband, if my blood sugar is really high and I'm like feeling that, I'm be like, look, my blood sugar is high. I need like an hour. And he'll just like, he'll lay off.
Disappear.
Like, he'll let me go for an hour because he knows that I get like totally bitchy over like 250.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, but to that same end, like I've had to explain to I have a 5-year-old daughter, and so I've had to explain to her when I'm being, I mean, there are times when you have a tough moment that has nothing to do with diabetes, but I'm always quick to explain and then apologize when it's diabetes related, because I don't want her thinking that that's my reaction to her. I want her to know that if I was in a better frame of mind outside of the blood sugar stuff, we would have had a better interaction. I don't want her always thinking, oh, mom just flies off the handle sometimes. Mom's kind of a crumb. Mom cries when paper clips hit the floor. Like, what's wrong with mom? Well, let me tell you what was wrong in that one moment, so she doesn't think that it's always her, you know?
And that's good to have that communication. And that's like
I think it takes a long time to get to that sort of, I remember when I was younger, maybe even like 8 years ago or something, that self-care, that taking care of, you know, ourselves and our own needs thing sounded like the worst idea ever. It wasn't until my kid was an infant and sobbing in her little bassinet thing because she wanted to be fed, and my blood sugar was 40. And I'm like, I actually cannot, in good mind, pick this child up because we're both going to hit the floor. So what's in both of our best interests? For me to watch her cry, eat my glucose tabs, get back up to range, and then take care of her. And it sounded so selfish in the moment, but in the long run, that was the safest, best course for everybody. But it was a really hard, like, flip to make, you know?
I totally agree. And for me, I always tell people like I didn't take good care of myself until I was, I don't know, I would say really like 24 to 25, I began that journey, and I'm going to be 33 in a couple months. So like, it's really been like 8 years or so that I've been like pretty hardcore, like this self-care thing is for me. But before that, from 9 to 24, I was just like, screw this, that's too much effort. And that's it. And that's the end of it. And I'm not going to exercise, and I'm not going to, you know, I'll do what I want, and I'll eat pizza every day and whatever. It was just like, it was not a thing. And so I don't want people to think that it's just like some like overnight thing.
Exactly.
You know, and all of a sudden you're gonna, it's like, it's a journey, and you have to like really want it and work for it.
And there are as many backward steps as there are forward ones, because I don't ever want to give the impression that it's, and once you achieve this apex of self-care and self-love, your A1C is always, you know, 6.1 and everything's all, it's like, well, no, it goes like this, just like everything does. You just have to be willing to put the effort in to keep it as much on the level once it starts to fall off, you know?
I like to use the analogy for me, because I like kind of, I call it the diabetes dominator mentality. It's like kind of like being on a winning sports team. It's like no team wins all the time, and you have to expect that there are going to be losses. But it's like when there are losses, instead of like locking yourself up and beating yourself up in this cage of like self-hatred, it's just like, let's study the video in our mind, see the plays that we made that were like, we could go over those plays and maybe do them a little bit differently. And next time, maybe we'll just take a different, you know, we'll run a different play. But mostly we're going to try to win a little bit more than we lose. Like that's for me what diabetes is. You know, that's just how it is. You can't win all the time. It's just not
perfection's unachievable. And I think we're set up kind of with a mental failure mode, because they're like, well, here's your pump, and here's your insulin, and here's your CGM, and here's all the tools that you need to perfectly manage this condition. So you are sent home with these things thinking, all right, well, this is all I'm supposed to use, and I'll have this figured out. Well, why am I high here, and why am I low here, and why can't I control this and control that? They never truly take into account all of the variables. And so it always feels like this failure, this shortcoming on us as people, that we're not managing it to the nth degree, when in fact doing your best is the best you can do, kind of thing. Like, what more can you do than just, like you said, review the tape. I'm not good with sports analogies, so I'm trying to reiterate what you said, but do the thing you said, and then continue to do that thing you said.
Yeah, I always say
thing you said.
It's about progress, not perfection, and that's all there is.
Right, exactly.
And I think for me, it's like celebrating all the good things. Like I think I talked about this on another one. It's just like every time you get a 100, you should put 10 times more energy into celebrating that than you do beating yourself up over a 250. Like, because we tend to put that so much energy into like, oh, this is horrible, I'm a horrible person, I can't get anything right, and we'll like focus all this energy on it. But meanwhile, it's like we'll have an 89 or a 110, and we're like, whatever, cool, and then we move on. It's like, no, focus.
Take a picture of it.
Take a picture of it, like have them in your phone and go look at them, because then you'll know it's possible, and you can feel really good about it. Like celebrate the win.
I totally agree.
Every time.
Totally agree.
So I want to ask you a little bit about your book. So why don't you tell us, and those of us who haven't read it out there in the internet world, what is your book about?
Okay, so the title of it is not one that I came up with because I feel like the title makes it seem as though it's a here's how to do everything related to diabetes. It's called Balancing Diabetes, which I have not done. So that seems kind of weird to say that that's the title of the book because it's sort of a misleading sort of thing. But it's about, for me, it's about building a life that's not built around diabetes, but building diabetes around your life. So I'm not going to change the things that I want to do just because there's diabetes on the side. I'm going to do what I want to do and drag that sucker along with me because otherwise I'm a slave to it, and I don't want that. So the book is about not like a how-to insulin doses and this sort of thing, but more, here are how some people with type 1 diabetes have integrated it into their lives. Here are the things that these people are doing. Here's how they've done the most mundane things. Like, I don't actually think pregnancy is mundane, but just to say it's, many people have been pregnant. So how to go through a pregnancy, how to go through college, how to go traveling with diabetes, things that some people truly think are inachievable. And I wanted to show case studies almost of people who have done it. So it's not just me sharing my story because that's kind of like that's a level of arrogance I'm not emotionally prepared for, but it's people that I trust and whose voices I think are really healthy to engage with telling their story. So people get a broad view, a broad stroke of what type 1 diabetes might be like. And hopefully people reading it can find some empowerment, like, oh yeah, maybe I can do that too, or feel as though there's a life to be found after diagnosis that's not just that long list of crap that's going to happen to you that sucks.
Yeah.
I want them to see the not so much sucky part.
I'm 100% on board with that. And it's like really kind of, for me, the foundation of these interviews is that I want to showcase people who are doing what they love, which is whatever that is. I don't care if you're a blogger, you're a doctor, you're, an astronaut, whatever you're doing, and you're climbing mountains and you have diabetes. And it's not the diabetes you're chasing your dreams, you're following your heart, and you're not letting diabetes be the reason why you're not doing that. That's for me, that's the whole mentality. That's what Diabetes Dominator means to me. And that's like, you don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to be anything other than what you love. You only have to be doing what you love and what makes your heart sing. And that's what being a diabetes dominator is in my mind. So your book is exactly what that means. So that's awesome. So I was going to say, no, I don't want to keep you all day. So I want to know, and I'm sure everybody else wants to know.
It's getting ominously dark outside. I don't know why. I watched the sun disappear and now I'm waiting for this crazy storm to come through.
Oh, I don't know. We're on the East Coast, but we'll see.
I know. I don't know why it's really dark outside. It's only 5:30.
So tell us. Are you scared?
Go ahead.
I'll try to keep you comforted. Shh, I'll bring the cat. You can pet her through the screen. So tell us what your top 3 kind of tips for thriving with diabetes are for you. What works best for Kerri? And they could be totally like existential, or like could be like eat every 5 minutes. Like, I don't know, whatever they are for you, like what works best for you.
So you want 3 things? It broke up just a little bit when you asked for it. So you want 3 kind of like life tips things?
Yep. 3 tips that Kerri likes to use every day.
Kerri in third person? Okay, I'm on it. So Kerri, what Kerri likes to do. I think one big thing is to be more forgiving. And that's, again, not like here's permission to not take your blood sugar seriously or to ignore the stuff that's required, on our diabetes to-do list, but to be forgiving when I put in good effort and the numbers don't match that input. I have to allow myself to feel the successes of putting the effort in. Good job, you did really good. You tried your best. Just didn't map out the way you wanted to. Move on to the next day. So that would be one thing, like a forgiveness. The second one is would be very clinical. So I think everybody's gone through that thing where they don't want to check very often and they ignore their meter and they just go off of their CGM, or they're not wearing their CGM at all or whatever. They just ignore the things that they need to know. So making sure that I check my blood sugar at least 4 times a day sounds like such a stupid thing, because you would think, well, Kerri, you've had diabetes for almost 30 years. Wouldn't that be something you just do automatically? Sometimes that's the first thing I let go of because I find the action of it so boring and frustrating, and it never gives me good feedback. It always makes me feel like crap. So but I have to force myself to do it. So first be forgiving, but then secondly, make sure I'm checking my blood sugar so that I have something to forgive.
Yeah.
I think, I'm gonna try to think like a third thing. I want it to be rooted in profundity. I want it to be really serious, but I don't know if I've got that going on. Like, I think,
to be very philosophical about it.
I know, like I want to have something that sounds really, really deep, but I think I have the exact opposite of that. I think that I need to also give myself permission to find the gallows humor and the funny stuff with this disease, because if I don't find a shred of entertainment or amusement in it, I'm afraid it will honestly eat me. And not my body, but that it will eat my soul and my brain and make me feel like crap all the time. So if I can keep a certain level of levity and keep that, you know, kind of at a basal rate like I do with my insulin, that serves me really well though, right? Like that feels like that's what's going to keep me going through the tougher points if I can realize that it's still okay.
I'm going to quote that, a basal rate of levity.
Okay.
That is so good. I'm actually going to write that down.
Write it down.
That, you know what? You were trying to say that it wasn't going to be profound, but that was pretty damn profound. That was.
I'm not going to finish my computer right now. I peaked. I'm done.
That was awesome. That's the quote of the day. Basal rate of levity. I love that.
That was on purpose. I thought of that. I mean, I planned that for like 10 years.
You've been planning this forever. So totally. Okay, awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your very busy day to come and chat with me about many awesome and entertaining things. And yeah, so I will be putting this out there, and I will also, so for anybody who wants to find Kerri, don't, you know, try to rewind and find, you know, things. I'm going to put all of her links under the blog on the YouTube video, so you can just click and find and go read more about her very funny and entertaining and profound musings on living with diabetes. So
profound.
Thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful day, and we will catch everybody on the next episode. Take care.
Thanks for having me.